Tim.
Hey, Jenny, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Welcome to the Part-Time Author Podcast with author, speaker, and mom, Jenny Heika. Joined by resident tech expert and illustrator Aaron Robbins. The Part-Time Author Podcast features conversations about writing, publishing, and how to pursue both while balancing the unexpected twists and turns of work and family.
Now, too, because we wanted to make sure. Are we good with audio, Aaron?
We're good. We're actually recording.
Oh, we're recording?
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome.
We're off and running.
Yeah. Welcome to the Part-Time Author Podcast. This is Jenny Heika, and I'm here with Aaron Robbins in Origins Coffee Shop, which you already mentioned. And we're so excited to have author Tim Myers here with us today.
Yeah. Virtually here with us today.
Virtually here. This is our first Skype podcast.
We have lots of cords here. Lots of cords.
Tim, it's so funny. Aaron, he let me borrow some earphones, and I have a microphone on, and I have these earphones on. I told him I feel like an astronaut.
I like that's her comparison of astronaut. Like anybody with headphones and a microphone is an astronaut.
I'm sure you guys are also providing a show for everybody in the coffee shop, which must be fun for them.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. We're so lucky because this coffee shop, Origins, they have this back conference room. So we're actually in a conference room in the back. So we're not in the main area, which is good.
That's too bad because I had some great plans for what I might scream out. I'll restrain myself.
Yeah. So anyway, Tim, I'm so welcome, and I'm so glad that you could join us today. This works out really well, and I'm so excited to talk about some of your projects. And just for listeners, Tim is he's got, I think, what do you have, 10 children's books out now?
I'm happy to correct you in an upward direction. I have 11 out, and one on the
That's awesome. Congratulations. And you have some adult books, and you're a storyteller, you're a teacher, you do all kinds of stuff. So we are just so excited to be able to talk to you about some of the things that you're working on and have you share with us today.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
I have to thank you guys right off for doing this. Jenny especially, and Aaron, you're probably involved in this too. Like I said in an email, kind of turned cartwheels to fit my schedule with this because I had to postpone. And it's really awesome to be part of the first Skype for part-time authors.
Yeah.
Yep.
Especially for an old person like me who now gets a little bit of tech street cred. So I'm delighted.
First of all, you're not old, and second of all, we are so glad that we were able to do this. So yeah, it's good to be able to test it out, and I'm glad our audio is working well. So
yeah.
So that's good. So, but anyway, Tim, if you want to just start off, maybe just sharing some of the current projects that you're doing right now, and even you just said you had 11 children's books now. So is this a new manuscript that you just sold, or is this something that's coming out in the near future?
I'm really I could not be more delighted to get that question. I just have sold. I have to talk about these carefully because contracts have not been finished. But
sure,
actually, there are actually 2 right now that are going to happen unless there's something crazy weird about the contracts. And in fact, there are a number of other things, which again, I won't talk about, but a number of things are close. And authors know how this is. I mean, a miss is as good as a mile when it comes to whether something's going to get published or not.
Yeah.
But a lot's going on, and I'm really, really grateful for that.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome.
By the way, right back at you for the Mommy Bliss book, which sounds really interesting to me. What's the title of it, Jenny?
It's Finding Mommy Bliss. And thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited.
Well, and one of my books this year, one of the adult books you mentioned, is a parenting book on fatherhood. So I have an automatic interest in that, and I just want to congratulate you because people who are making the world better for parents are making the whole world better. I just think it's great that you're doing that.
Oh, well, thank you. And so, yeah, I'm actually on your website right now, and I'm looking at your writing for adults and your books. And so is that the Glad to Be a Dad, A Call to Fatherhood?
Yes.
And that looks like an ebook?
It was an ebook when it first came out. It's now a print book too.
Oh, awesome.
It's like I need to update my website there, Jenny. Thank you.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit, if you would, I'd love to hear, before we get into your kind of history, how you got started writing, all that kind of stuff like that. I'd love to hear that what you just said kind of piqued my interest of something that started as an ebook and then moved into the, I guess, more traditional realm. I think a lot of our listeners are interested about how that worked for you. What was the process like of writing that book, having it come out as an ebook, and then moving into a different medium for it?
Isn't that fascinating too, guys, that as writers, we have, and writers in general have this, they're super interested in these topics. And I think it's partly out of anticipation and a sense of potential and partly out of terror. things are changing so fast, and there's so
I know.
writers are going crazy. I've always said that when writers get together, despite what most people think, they don't tend to talk about ideas and experiences. They tend to talk about editors, money, and time.
Yeah.
Because it's a practical thing. And now that's been blown out of the water because all we're doing is talking about tech.
Yeah.
So what happened to me is that particular book, again, we talked, the publisher and I, a wonderful guy, Christopher Robbins, who runs Familius, a new digitally based publisher with a niche focus on family life. He, and by the way, a veteran publisher and a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
We strategized a lot, and Christopher did especially. Do we make it an ebook? How do we do this? And it turns out that his conclusion was we should have put them both as and print at the same time. And I'm no expert on this, and there are people who study this, up and down. But one of the things I'm hearing is that a lot of times what works best is to have both the ebook and the print book available simultaneously.
Oh, at the same time.
Right. And we can see clearly that there are huge changes afoot. But as we can see, looking back at certain other technology, anybody remember 8-track tapes, you never know what's going to stick and what isn't. So I'm involved, and again, in a project that I haven't signed a contract for yet, but also is a children's book tablet and phone-oriented approach that also combines POD print books. So it's fascinating, but every time, and again, you guys know and understand this, you're rolling the dice. You just don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for this one, it wasn't like you were self-publishing. It wasn't like you had this idea and you were just going to go rogue and self-publish it and see what happens. You were working with somebody that was trying to or taking a step into digital publishing and trying to work out how all these things are in harmony together. Not self-publishing, but digital ebooks, print on demand, or print books, and all that kind of stuff. You had somebody you were working with.
That's a very interesting question, because as it happens, I was in a truly Sarah Palin-esque state about this book where I was about to go rogue.
Okay.
Because I couldn't get it. In fact, this adult book, and I know we're going to talk about children's books.
Oh, no, we want to talk about both. So that's perfectly fine.
Good. And when it comes to publishing, obviously, that part of it, the mechanics apply to either type.
Right.
But the book was rejected 76 times.
Wow.
So I was ready to go self-publishing, and I looked into it very seriously, and I was about to format and contract some cover and all that stuff. And this niche publisher popped up, and boom. And I'm incredibly grateful I didn't have to go through self-publishing, although obviously a small select group of people is going great guns with self-publishing. I think the introduction of self-publishing is part of this flat world that Thomas Friedman's been talking about. It's fantastic, but if people think that self-publishing is the yellow brick road to Oz, it's not.
Absolutely.
It's incredibly difficult and demanding.
Yeah. But Tim, I just want to say, I love that you shared that this book had been rejected 76 times, because we've talked about that so many times on this podcast. Just like sometimes perseverance is the name of the game, and not to get discouraged, because you never know what's down the road for any given manuscript. And I remember when Patty Newman was on this show, she brought an actual roll of all of the rejection letters. She had taped them together.
It was like a biblical scroll of rejection.
Yeah, and it was actually for the book that ended up being her first book contract. So I was going to ask you, did you save all your rejection letters for this one? Do you bring it to your talks and share it with readers, or what do you do?
Virtually, I do. I love the biblical scroll thing. It's like the Jeremiah, one horrible complaint or another. Yeah, I do, and in fact, I keep all my rejections, of course, partly because I never know that I might live in a shack and need wallpaper, and I could use wallpaper. But it's interesting too, because I keep electronic, digital, obviously, submission databases.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest pleasures in life for a writer is if you go to get a book accepted, and you go back and count your rejections. It's like, you marry the greatest woman on earth, and then you go back and think, oh, that girlfriend, tough for you. You missed out. Oh, what you're missing, And obviously it's not that way. And obviously what we have to do as writers is take this as business decisions. But Jenny, I so love your point. There are so many reasons that a book or any manuscript gets rejected that you can't take rejection as being one thing or two things or three things. Now, of course, the problem with that is manuscripts also get rejected because they're not good enough, period.
Right.
That happens all the time, but you never quite know.
Right.
So for me, one of the most amazing feelings, I've got another children's book right now that's one meeting away from being accepted by a big publisher. Now, we'll see what happens, right?
Right.
Many a slip. But if that thing comes through, I wrote that thing 2 decades ago,
Oh, wow.
years ago,
Wow.
and it's been sitting on my computer like the world's greatest monument to obscurity.
Yeah.
And if it comes out, and it's hard when you're a writer, when you're submitting, it's hard to keep that vision of this thing that just came out in little old you someday actually being a book and maybe even have some success in the world. But that can be the case. And that's why I love your emphasis on persistence.
Well, and I think like from an outsider's perspective, I mean, even before I started writing, I would look at these best-selling authors and just assume it happened overnight, right? You just assume they're just instantly successful. You don't know that that's a 20-year-old manuscript. You don't know that they've been facing rejection on it for 10 years or whatever it might be.
They worked on it.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to me, too, that this is one of those writer's secrets, right? But if you get a manuscript that you've had for years published, you as the author, the last thing you're going to do is tell the world that you wrote it years ago.
Yeah.
Because, that you want to project this strength like, oh, yeah, I write something, it just slides out of me, and then they all want to publish it. I'm exaggerating for effect, but there is some truth to that. I mean, I've learned to be a huge change in my life as a writer over the last year has been that I've learned to be a promoter. And one of the things you learn, and this is you hear people say this all the time, but it's amazing the degree to which perception is reality.
Right.
And you can't lie. I mean, you can't go out and say to people, I'm a great writer. I mean, that's for people to judge.
Right.
And you can't pretend that you're a big shot or anything like that. You have to really have an amazing work. But what's funny is having an amazing work and getting that work out in front of people are two completely different things, and they're vital, both of them.
Right. And I think you just brought up a great point, is that writers and authors can't just go into it thinking that's all they're going to do. Even if you are more reclusive or you're more introverted, there's a big part of this that is the promotion part. And it's the marketing of your book once it's out there, or even the marketing of yourself before your book is out there. Things to think about, like a web presence or a website. So you just brought up a really good point.
What you're doing. And I found for myself thinking about that is like when you're just writing for the hope that you're going to become famous, when you're just writing because you want to be a celebrity, it's hard to be a promoter because you're not promoting something that's really real. But when you love what you're writing, when you love the words you've written down, when you love the theme, it's almost like promotion becomes part of that, because you're like, I can't help but talk about this. I put blood into this and I love it. And if it never gets published, fine. But it's not going to be because of lack of passion, because I love this thing. And I've struggled so much, as Jen has struggled with that sort of like, what's the difference between wanting to be a successful writer and just having writing flowing out of me, where promotion is an extension of that flow because I love what I'm talking about. And that's all super new for me. But to hear that a book on fatherhood is 76 times, that's when you started thinking about self-publishing. Like, to me, that's like a huge credit to you, because I would have been thinking about it after the first one. I'd been like, oh, this one guy didn't like it. That's it. Forget them. I'm self-publishing, But I think that's fantastic.
Okay, so Aaron, what you've just done unwittingly is prove that I am, in fact, old, because there was not self-publishing as an option when this book was being rejected all these times.
Oh, right.
I mean, maybe the last 10 rejections, something like that.
Yeah.
But Aaron, you have absolutely hit the nail on the head. In fact, I can't say enough about the point you just made, because writers right now are in this really weird situation. In fact, it reminds me of that scene from Star Wars when they all get dumped down in the garbage.
Yeah. Now you're speaking my language.
And, the wall. And the walls are closing in on them, know? I mean, on one hand, we've got all this competition that's always been there. And on the other hand, the digital revolution is saying now, like you said, Jenny, you've got to have a you've got to do all this stuff.
Right.
There's all this pressure about branding and all this stuff. I mean, writers are like, oh my God, how do we navigate this? And the answer is, in my opinion, what you said, Aaron. The first and single most important promotional strategy by far that overshadows everything else you can do is to write a great book. And that takes that takes that being in isolation. That takes writing it for its own sake. That takes writing it. It's not like you don't think about the market at all, but it takes having a true vision of that piece so you can generate the passion that you're talking about, Aaron.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, promo then becomes a natural, organic thing to do. I dragged my feet for years on promo. I didn't want, it was a question of time, which was my biggest issue, because time's a big issue for most writers.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I didn't know if I would, are you just a marketer, whatever, the great writers don't do that. Well, like Jenny said, yes, they do, most of them.
Yeah.
And then when I finally learned how to do it right, what I found is it didn't feel horrible to me because, like you said, Aaron, this is something that I care about and feel strongly about and am proud of.
So it was
the time I
authentic.
put in promoting, yeah, it's authentic, exactly.
Yeah.
That you are not just a marketer out there. Nothing against people who contract as marketers, but that's the opposite of what I want to do with my life. That's not me. But I can push my own work and get it in front of people if I care about it. And again, Jenny, your book about motherhood, there is such a need. I'm starting to think there's kind of a crisis in parenting going on in the country.
Yeah.
And so, things that help mothers or fathers improve, that's easy to get behind.
Yeah. Easy to be passionate about, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's. I'd love to hear. I mean, I know we well, Jenny knows you a little bit. I didn't know it all. So we did some research and know that you have a lot of writing and a lot of that kind of stuff in your family. I want to get to that. But before that, somebody that picks up the book on fatherhood, where can they get it, and what are they going to get? What do you hope they get out of that book? What do you hope they leave that book with?
I love that question. For one thing, this book on fatherhood is about the general situation, and it's actually a book for families. I mean, for husbands and wives. In fact, some of the best responses I've gotten have been from wives. It talks about where we are today in family life, particularly about the role of men and things like that. But it's also full of stories and a lot of personal stuff from my family, what my kids say, all this, what it really means to be a parent. Aaron,
Yeah.
are you?
Yep, I'm a parent. We're both.
Yep.
Both Jenny and I have.
I know Jenny is, right, because I saw it on your site, Jenny. We three know that you don't know what there is to know until you know it. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Amen.
A little bit of a lag there, even where I don't know it until a few seconds after
you don't know
I
until
needed
you
to know
have
it.
kids,
Yeah.
right?
That's right. Don't know. That's a much better way of saying it. You don't know how much you don't know until you have those kids. So part of it is to talk with what I want to be inspiring and humorous things, but also realism about, just what it takes, because it's a hell of a thing.
Yeah.
And so in other words, the two things I want people to get out of this book are a sense of how funny and fun and how profoundly good it is, but at the same time to be realistic and to have some sense about how family life and expectations of males and females are changing. And we need to work together to make those things be what they need to be for kids. And that, what's fascinating for me, or I guess fitting with your point, Aaron, about being passionate about a book, I obviously see no difference whatsoever between my adult book on fatherhood and family life and my children's books, because it's all about children. I mean, it's all about helping children be what they can be. I don't mean to ignore the adults, because adults also like to read picture books. So you see my
Heck yeah.
Oh, that sounds like a really good book.
So what's
Tim.
the official name of it?
It's called Glad to Be Dad, A Call to Fatherhood. And I'm happy to say that I just got one of the chapters in a shortened version is going to appear in September in Motherload, which is the parenting blog of the New York Times.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
we were quoted on Baby Zone, which is Disney's website, and we're actually featured on with an interview on Parents Magazine website. And Parents Magazine is huge.
Oh,
So,
it's huge.
it's out there. We're getting good reviews and that kind of thing. Again, anybody who's a parent knows that it's not an easy thing these days. So this is all to the good.
Yeah, it sounds like such an encouragement. It sounds really, really good.
So yeah, and it sounded like you have 2 boys. Is that right?
I do. 2 boys and a daughter. Yep.
Yeah, I was just telling. So you have 3 kids. Okay, so you have 2 boys and a daughter, and I was just telling Aaron that I think your oldest son just got his PhD, right?
Yeah, I'm going to try to stay in my chair and not jump up and scream and act like an idiot.
You can do that. You're not on video, remember? You can do whatever.
Congratulations to
congrats to
him.
him.
You guys end up calling 911 because you think I'm having a stroke.
Right. Where'd Tim go?
He just finished his PhD, and he has taken a job at the University of Colorado Boulder. My family's all in Colorado Springs. We are just over the moon about this. And he's a composition rhetoric expert, so he's going to be teaching writing. He's amazing.
Wow.
My second son is in Missoula. He's
Montana.
He's amazing too. He's lived a very physical life in one sense. He was a Coast Guard. He was in the Coast Guard for 5 years, and he's been a hotshot, which these are the guys who fight the forest fires. And you remember horrible tragedy.
Yeah, we just lost a bunch of those guys.
Those guys were hotshots, and that's what my son's doing. So he's still working on fire, but that's
a big area for that in Missoula, right? There's a big training school there or something for the hot shots.
And they're all over the place too. And like he now is working on fire, but in kind of a less tense job, more clearing. But there's a helicopter involved, for God's sake, so it's awfully cool.
Yeah.
But he also has a master's in lit, and he's not sure exactly what he's going to do, but he's talking about getting a doctorate. Both of those, these guys are just super, super smart. And of course, all the credit for that goes to my wife and me. I mean, it's obvious. Yeah, we take all the credit. And then my daughter actually works at a children's independent bookstore, and although she doesn't like me to say it, she's a writer. She's very seriously a writer. And
so you have it in your genes, Tim. I mean, and then your wife is a professor, it looks like, as well, right?
She is. She's a PhD reading specialist. And, can you imagine what Scrabble is like at my house?
I cannot imagine.
There will be blood.
Oh, my gosh. I am so impressed with your whole family.
That's so funny. So let me ask you this. I want to get into kind of your history, how you start writing, when you really that, but it's so fascinating to me as a parent. It's like we sometimes encourage or we put our expectations of our kid to become like doctors and they end up becoming like tattoo artists, or we put our expectation for them to become tattoo artists and they become doctors. And for you, it's like, I would love to hear how that all wraps out. You're a writer and all of your kids are like, I want to do what Dad does. That's awesome.
It's really strange too when you think about it, because we believe very strongly, my wife and I, that you do not, and Aaron, I love your examples, right? You do not in any way pressure kids for career choices.
Yeah.
One of the most important, in fact, my wife and I quote this all the time. It's a line from the great Russian psychologist Vygotsky. The interaction between an adult and a child is like a dance. The child leads and the adult follows. That's our watchword for parenting. So we never pushed that in our house at all. But of course, and in fact, we never forced our kids to read or pressured them to read. But everybody in this house just loves books and reading, and our kids were reading from early on with my boys, and again later when Cassie was a little kid. When we go to the library, we'd get the maximum number of books you could get.
There's such a theme.
Me too.
I'm sure you guys have seen this too. I can't believe this phenomenon where you see a mother or a father arguing with a kid at the library, saying, well, you can get 3 of those books, put the other ones back. I'm going, what? Your kid wants books? You're telling him no?
Yeah.
So anyway, they grew up in a very literacy, storytelling, language-oriented, child-centered, let's go play kind of home. Yeah. And again, not to the exclusion of play. I mean, I spent more time playing with G.I. Joes, for goodness sakes, than probably very many adults. And so this stuff is absorbed in a sense, you could say, but my wife and I, the way we look at it is, if you have a home where books and reading and language are as natural a part of your family life as everything else, of course your kids are going to, it's like life. Of course my kids read. Reading is part of life. It should be. And I think it's an unnatural situation where kids grow up in homes where there aren't a lot of reading material. And obviously there are lots, the causation for that can be very complicated based on socioeconomic status and all kinds of things. But little kids take so naturally to reading and writing. Well, we just kept that going. Yeah. So that's what happened. Now, interestingly enough, too, my own experience was the opposite. With one exception, I had an uncle who is now deceased, who was a priest and a writer. But when I was growing up, he didn't live with the family. He lived in another state. He later became like a member of the family. He later lived close to us, was at the house all the time. But there were no precedents. There were hardly any books in my house. My parents are wonderful, but they're Midwesterners. They didn't really, our conversations tended to be more directions and that kind of thing. And yet somehow I got the bug and it started coming out.
Yeah. So
and
how,
I
was going to say, it's so interesting to me. How did you come from that to a place of just being so immersed in reading and writing and then eventually becoming an author? Like, what was your journey? What did that look like?
it is very odd when you think of it, isn't it? And maybe it's because our ideas about, I mean, there's this constant, obviously, there's this constant philosophical debate between nature and nurture. And one of the things people are saying a lot these days is obviously it's a combination of the two. So when you see that kind of thing happen, and my wife is very similar in her own family the same way. Well, anyway, I can tell you what happened to me is there was actually a catalytic moment. I never was serious about school. When I was in second grade, I got an F in understanding what's read, which is, reading comprehension.
Okay.
Tell my current spouse about that. Huh?
Right.
If somebody had tapped that little 7-year-old on the shoulder and said, "You know what, you're going to marry a reading specialist."
Wow.
And I was, I just kind of lived. I never thought of it. I was a very thoughtless, oblivious little kid. When I'm in sixth grade, for some reason, our teacher gave us an assignment. This is this very severe Sisters of Charity nun, Sister Mary Boniface. And we thought she was mean, And she wanted us to write a story for the next day or an essay, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So for some reason, and again, guys, I have no idea why, I wrote a poem and I turned it in. And the next day, she's like, "Tim, I need to talk to you at recess," which is, oh my God, I'm in trouble.
No, yeah.
She's got a ruler in her hand and you're missing recess.
Yeah. And in fact, the words that you can imagine echo in your head at that moment is, "does not follow directions."
Right.
Because that was a big thing. And I'm standing there in my corduroy pants, shaking like a leaf on a tree. And she says, "You know that poem you wrote?" And I'm like, "Yes, sister." She says, "I liked it."
Oh.
She encouraged me. I just kind of melted. She encouraged me and put together a little booklet of my poems. Nobody had ever, this was beyond imagining to me. I became a writer in that second.
Wow.
Because of
That's
her.
awesome.
That is so
It's
neat.
awesome.
And that's just neat to pause for a minute too and just think of that from like a parent's or a teacher's
Yeah.
perspective or something, that just that little bit of encouragement for somebody who has that storytelling ability, to just a little encouragement can make a difference on the whole path.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a cool story.
Just
Tim.
a little bit of encouragement as a parent. Like, we grow up with my kids having canvases, oil canvases and acrylic canvas in the house is just normal to them. And they're kind of, they're not cheap things to have around, but they always they don't want to draw on paper. They want to draw on what daddy draws on. And the day that I let Kennedy go from you know what? Paint on the canvas. This one's yours. That's when she starts kind of referring to herself as an artist to other people. Like, "What do you like to do?" "Well, I'm kind of like an artist. I draw a lot."
Oh, that's so
cool.
cool.
And it's at that moment, it's not a long history of things. It's at a moment somebody validated and gave her something that she thought was incredibly valuable, this canvas. And at that moment, she became an artist.
That's
in our
awesome.
That's a perfect example. Great oaks from little acorns grow. And a lot of people don't. I think most people, it seems, most parents have a sense that what they do as parents is going to make a difference. But I don't know if they have an intense enough detailed sense of that.
Yeah.
So again, that kid of yours, who knows where that can lead?
Yeah.
And all you have to do is read artist biographies to find stories like this.
Yeah.
There's a great story. I can never remember this guy's name. He's an illustrator. I haven't seen him that much in children's books lately, but a long Italian name. But he tells a story of being 5 years old. He's in kindergarten and he's drawing something. And the teacher comes over and says, "Wow, that's beautiful. Someday you could be an artist." And the kid is confused and he looks up at the teacher and he says, "I am an artist."
Yeah. Amen.
I love that.
Kids are capable of more. These impulses that they often and the counter example of this is my wife still laughs about all the money we put into karate for our sons.
Yeah.
She goes, "Yeah, put in all that money, and what do they get to be, yellow belts or whatever?" But we don't know that they might not have gone on to be lifetime karate people.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That makes me feel better because I think we went to the yellow belt too.
Right. Everybody's a yellow belt.
Or whatever.
It's now
okay.
It's now the default. I'm just joking.
So don't put it on your Facebook or your resume.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh wow.
So assuming you didn't get published at 6, what happens from there?
Well, this was actually a kind of an odd thing for me, but actually worked out really well. Because there was no self-consciousness in any big way in my family, and I had almost no self-consciousness, I wrote and wrote, and I wrote when I felt like it. And I mean, girls, sports, school as a distant third. That was kind of the way I went through preteen and teen years.
Yeah.
And the high school too was big on sports, and it was a small school and that kind of thing. And I was actually a successful football player, although I was very conflicted about it for certain reasons. There's a book in there somewhere someday. But my point is that for years, including through years of my adulthood, I wrote in a way that I can only describe as absolutely pure. And not because I chose that. Writing was like eating or walking or playing basketball. It was just something that you do in life, So I wrote all the time. Now, the other thing is, at this point, my wife and I had our sons fairly early, and we were both full-time teachers, and we were totally committed to family first. So there also was almost no time. But I have today I think I'm on my 50th personal journal. They're huge.
Yeah,
so I was always writing. And I was always doing songwriting too when I could do all stolen moments. It was always stolen moments. So
I love that. Stolen moments.
Yeah.
I just want to pause on that, Tim, because, we say, part-time author, and Aaron and I have talked about this, and, there definitely are full-time authors. And even if you look at your portfolio of work, you would assume, well, he's a full-time author. Yet I know you're also a professor, right, as well?
And that's such a good point to pause on, Jenny, because there's one of the ironic things about me, and I don't think I'm unusual in this at all. What I look like on paper in terms of publications, I'm not making anywhere close enough money to sustain my family or to sustain my half of the family's finances.
Yeah, and we've talked about that. And I've said to Aaron, most authors really, truly are part-time authors where we're balancing other jobs, family, and other things. And so truly, a lot of times, those moments of writing or finishing that book or polishing that manuscript, they are exactly what you said, stolen moments. And so I love how you phrased that, because it really is. It's like, how do you find time to write? Well, it's stolen moments. If you love doing it, you find time to do it. Writers write, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, go on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, what I was going to say is that we were saying this earlier about how with all this pressure about marketing and promo and targeting submissions, all that stuff that's logistical and crucial, when you write, you still have to write in some kind of way in your head, like, so let me use a sports example. When you're playing, basketball is my favorite sport. When you're playing basketball, if you try to force a play, you usually don't do very well. You do your best when you are like going 100%, but you're also totally relaxed at the same moment, and you're doing it for no other reason than for its own sake.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even describe, it's purely the thing itself. So I was writing like that for years. The thought of sending something away for publishing, I didn't even know what the word submission meant. I didn't know.
Interesting.
So
really interesting.
years, I just wrote. And the great thing is I had that time and that space in my own mind, which was the only place I was with any of this, to actually develop this. And I always think of it, when I think of this, I always think of an apple hanging on a tree, just slowly ripening. That's what happened to me.
Yeah.
So my first book, I was just noticing this the other day. My first children's book I published, I think it was 91. I think I was 39. I think that's the first. I published a couple little educational things before that, but that was my first book. That's a long time to.
Yeah. And what was the title of your first book?
That book, I love it when people ask this question. That book's called Let's Call Him Huma Huma Nuka 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 Apawa Oi Oi.
Oh, yeah.
I left that book.
What? No.
It's my Hawaiian fish book, for which my wife has often said that's the stupidest title you can ever give a book, because nobody will ever remember it.
Or the best title,
I
depending.
love it. Oh, and I see it on your website. It's got turquoise on the cover.
Yeah. And I mispronounce it. I haven't been practicing enough.
I love it. So that was your first one. And then for that one, once you decided, because I know you said you hadn't even heard the word publication, what made you go from, okay, you wrote this book and then you wanted to submit it for publication, and did it get rejected a number of times, or did you have great luck your first time around, or what was the journey for that very first book?
And that's interesting too, because this part I think is really, every book is a story, and every submission and acceptance of publication is a story, but this one's quite a story from my point of view. First of all, I don't know what happened then to get me going. I think I might have had a little more time. That was the year my daughter was born. We had this big plan, Priscilla's my amazing wife. who's also the world's greatest teacher.
Aw.
We had this plan that we were, when she finished her PhD and got a job as a professor, then I would start writing full time. And then we found out we were pregnant in the middle of her dissertation. And I won't go into the details of that story, but let's just say it was a surprise.
No.
And so I think that's what happened is I had a little more time because I was staying home with my daughter and taking a little time. When my wife would come home, I'd take a little time to write, which again, I believe it was like an hour every 3 days,
Yep.
which at that point was the most time I'd ever had to write in my life. So it was
Yep.
incredible. But what happened is I sent the book out to a number of places and it got rejected, of course. And I got a rejection from a major house. Now, I was so naive and so green. The rejection letter was super long and personal, right? So
Which
you
is
guys
very
know this
good,
too.
Tim, right? I mean, we get excited about those kinds of rejection letters.
That's perfect because that's the writer's reaction, which the rest of the world does not understand at all. We call it the good rejection.
Yeah, we want
And
to
we're
frame
like,
them sometimes. I mean, I have rejection letters that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so good.
Yeah.
It helps you so much, and you want to grab somebody in the street and say, I got a wonderful rejection.
Yeah.
And then
I was rejected.
I want to marry her. She turned me down, but she was so nice.
She
about
said no.
So I didn't understand the distinction between the good rejection and just the bad rejection, and the more common one by far, the form letter rejection.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and what this author had done was give me all this response to the book, and they don't do this anymore. I mean, that happened more often back then.
Yeah.
And she'd put little yellow Post-its all over my manuscript with
Wow.
suggestions. Now, at the time, I was mad. And I was mad, in fact, because I was hurt, because we often use anger to mask our hurt, right?
Right.
And what especially I remember being mad because of little yellow Post-its. I'm like, who does she think she is? By the way, the answer could have been, she's an author she's an editor at a major house. That's who she thinks she is. But I wasn't thinking that far into it. And so I put the manuscript away. And I worked on other things. Now, one of the single best pieces of advice that I've ever heard for authors is rejection is tough. Always be working on something else.
Yes,
Yeah.
we have talked about that many times.
Yeah.
I so agree with you, Tim.
Absolutely the best way. So every time I'd see that thing with those Post-its on it in my files, I'd get mad all over again. So honest to God, about a year later, I see that again and I have that wonderful moment. And it's like that moment when somebody broke up with you and dumped you. I don't know why I'm doing all these romantic metaphors today. Somebody broke up with you, like months ago, and every time you thought of them, you felt horrible and rejected and useless. And then all of a sudden you go, hey, I can think about it and I don't feel bad.
Yeah.
So I looked at that thing and I'm like, you know what? And it's because, again, I was working on other things. So I pulled it out of curiosity and I read it over and I read over the comments. And because I had taken my defenses down, which is what you need to do.
Right.
And it's one of the hard things to do, but you have to learn to, take those force fields down, whatever, the shields on the Starship Enterprise. So I looked at these things and I thought, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure about that one because my deal is the author is the ultimate decider, right? To use George Bush's word. But you have to be open-minded or you can't make good decisions.
Right.
So I took about half of her suggestions. I rewrote it. Others, I don't like it. I sent it out. Either that time or the next time it was accepted. And of course, I'm on cloud nine. I get a phone call that my book is going to be published.
And was that with
Now-
Marshall Cavendish, your very first one? Because I know you have many books with Marshall Cavendish.
Right. And thank you for noticing, by the way. This is with Best Press, which is a small Hawaiian press. It's a Hawaiian fish local store. And by the way, this book is still in print, which is astonishing to me.
Wow.
What happened was one of the suggestions she has made, and forgive me going on so long, but this story amazing.
No, that we're good.
One of the suggestions she had made was the parents, it's the fish called the Lau Vili Vili Nuka Nuka Oi Oi and the famous Huma Huma Nuka Nuka Apawa. So my question.
That just makes me laugh. It's such a mouthful. Sorry. It's great.
No, I'm used to reading it to kids, Jenny. You're pure of heart.
I
That's
love
why
it.
So my question was, geez, if those two fish got married, what would they ever name their kid? So in the story, I had named the kid Bixby because I thought it was just a cute name. And she said, well, since the parents have Hawaiian names, why not give the baby a Hawaiian name? I thought, of course, be consistent. So I looked through my notes of Hawaiian vocabulary and I found this word, hapa. And it says it means half or little bit. I'm like, little bit, that's perfect. So when it gets accepted, my editor later sends me a letter and she says, we want you to know that we were so impressed with your use of the word Hapa, since, as you are no doubt aware, here in Hawaii, that refers to children of mixed ethnicity marriages. And I wrote back and said something like, yes, I think it was important.
That's hilarious.
And my point is that here was something that my book became much better.
Much better.
Much deeper.
Yeah.
Because I listened to the editor. And then here's the part I love. My editor later tells me she has a friend who's a mother who has a little boy. My book has come out. The mother reads the book to the little boy and tells her editor friend about it. And the editor tells me when the kid gets to the end of the book, and his parents are mixed, from different ethnic groups. When he gets to the end of the book, he points to the little fish, this 5-year-old in Hawaii, and says, "That's me."
Oh, that's awesome.
Precious.
For me,
Wow.
this was amazing. This is what writing is for.
Yes.
This was a kid, by the way, 5. He'll probably forget this 30 seconds later, but I connected with another human being through literature, and that just meant the world to me.
Oh yeah. Oh, that is
absolutely.
so awesome.
And maybe the book title, maybe the words in the book, maybe the pictures he'll forget, but the moment where he understood, some other human being understood what it meant to be him, like, dude, you don't forget that. That starts to develop who you are as a person. I think that's why authentic writing not for search engines, writing not for the sake of celebrity or ego, but writing for the soul is like, it is what it's about.
Yeah.
I think.
That is
Erin,
awesome.
I can't believe.
No, I agree with you.
I can't thank you for saying that. I mean, that's not only graciously stated, but that just lifts me off the floor. That's what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that is such a cool story about your first book. And then you've had so many children's books since then, Tim. And are most of your books with Marshall Cavendish, or is there more of a variety of different publishers in there?
Most of my books are with Marshall Cavendish, but I haven't placed one with them for a long time. And they have now, as you both probably know, sold themselves to Amazon.
Oh, Amazon. Okay.
Yeah. And at the moment, they're not acquiring. So
Got it.
Right now, yeah. But I'm one of those people who's like, a variety of different editors. In fact, I've been thinking about this a lot lately too. And I'm throwing this out again because it's this, it's the kind of logistics writers are really interested in. One route to go, obviously, is to be somebody like Mo Willems. Of course, Mo Willems' greatest move was just to be Mo Willems, right? But to tend to be with the same publisher and develop a relationship with them over time. And I think that's just a wonderful thing, and I strive for that. But I find that I write too eclectically for that to happen in a consistent way with me. So I tend to submit things to big and small and to, unique and general and niche and that kind of thing.
And that goes back to something that we've talked about before on the podcast as well, is that taking a look at your manuscript and then taking a look at, what publisher might it fit, right? So big versus small, what does their list look like? That kind of thing.
It's funny too, because right now I'm particularly high on this idea. As I've suggested, I mean, after 2 months from today, I could have, some things are going to go, but so I'm getting some things published, and it could be a significant number. And the main reason for that is going to be because of targeted submission. Now, obviously, the main reason I hope is that the books are good.
The books are good,
when
right?
It comes to what the logistics of submission are. So, for example, one I hope is going to come through, and I can't, but it's a really small publisher. But the manuscript fits with what they do, and they have an odd mix of things that they do. So this means, and it helps, to do it over time, and I'm sure you guys do it. Trolling website. God, that sounds bad, doesn't it?
No, but I know what you're saying. Looking at the different websites, looking at the different catalogs, looking at what they're all about, the feel, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I do more of that now than I even used to do. And I learned early on. I mean, I knew when I became an author, you got to do your homework. So of course, and Skibwe is so fantastic. By the way, do you guys call it Skibwe?
You know what?
SCB.
Oh, no, I was going to say Skibwe. No, we say SCBWI, and we say it so fast and nobody understands what we're saying.
I didn't even know what it was for like a year of knowing Jenny. She would just say it. And I'm like, I guess that's where she gets her car tuned up. I don't know.
But we talk about it all the time though, Tim. I mean, what a great organization.
They are fantastic. And they, so I would go on and look at the market listings. So now, for example, and again, this is part of that whole new orientation that I've come into, which I should have done earlier. I'll now look at the market listing, and then I'll go to their website, and then I'll look at their catalog. I mean, I do a lot more than I used to. And now, sometimes the thing is too, sometimes you can't really target a submission. One of the things I think is hilarious is somebody must have said this. This must be a quote from somebody at some point. But what do the editors want? What do the publishers want? You know, the writers, we're always asking that. And we ask it with an air of exasperation. What do they want? And the answer is more of the same, but different.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So can't totally target things, because what about the breaking new book, i.e. Harry Potter, that wasn't like anything else that came out before, even though it has elements that were like,
Sure.
you know, so you can't always target, but it's amazing. My first book was a book about Hawaiian fish, and I sent it to Hawaiian Press that had children's books as well as other titles. That's part of the reason it made it. Targeting submission really can. It does. I can't say does, because it doesn't every time, but it really can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And again, you guys know that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So how do you prefer to write?
We'll talk more about that, I think, on another episode when we have time for some technical nuts and bolts, because I'm not published, haven't ever submitted anything in my life. I don't know anything about that, and it's super...
Talk through more like even the steps you can take to do specific
what do you
research.
Actually do? Where do you go on SCDW? What
sure.
website? How does that all work?
Yeah, we can
We'll
totally.
do it in an episode. Tim's time's way too valuable to get into nuts and bolts.
If you want to talk to me ever, just let me know, because it's one of these things where I find when I talk, like I talk to a lot of writers on my campus, friends, and it's amazing to me because of all the changes and the already difficult challenge of getting published. It's incredible how much writers need to help each other strategize. And I didn't realize that to the degree I realize it now.
Yeah.
And again, I'm up to my elbows in it all the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, what do you
ahead.
got? Well, I was going to... No, you go, because mine's not going to be fun.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, just out of curiosity, Tim, do you prefer writing children's books or the parenting, the fatherhood book? Like, are you leaning toward one or the other lately, or are you still just doing both and loving both?
You know, I tell people all the time, I say that like everybody's always asking me. So I say on a regular basis that we live in a world that is very much oriented towards specialization. You know, in this world, the money and the status and the ladder, the career ladders are set up much more for people to specialize. I'm a generalist. I'm an absolute dyed-in-the-wool born generalist, which means I follow my heart and my nose, which is fantastic, but it creates all kinds of career challenges. Well, what's life for, you know?
Right.
So my answer is I don't see anything I do as being any different or any better than anything else I do. Yeah. So I'm as interested in storytelling, you know, standing up in front of a group and telling stories, as I am in songwriting, as I am in writing for kids, as I am in writing for adults. And even within those, and again, I'm not recommending this because it makes life a lot harder. Even like as a children's writer, okay, fiction or nonfiction. Picture books for young kids, picture books for older kids, longer fiction, kinds of, you know, my ideas are all over the map. So I don't lean any way, but I can tell you this, I feel exactly the same passion and fascination for children's books as I feel for adult literature and adult nonfiction that I write. And it's no less challenging, no less, it requires no less creativity. There's nothing about it that is less than adult literature. And many, many people in the world do not understand that.
Yeah, I think you alluded to that earlier when you and I don't obviously know you very well. I've been talking to you for 48 minutes, but what I would guess about you is that because the effect of those books is the same, that it positively affects family. I mean, it starts with kids. The effect of a kid's book or a good dad's book is the same, that people understand how to love each other and live in this world in a way that's, you know, fulfilling to them. That's what I would guess about you.
Well, and by the way, Aaron, I feel like I know you because you said "There Will Be Blood" a little while ago when we were talking. So right away,
vicious.
I know you know your movie references and apply them in hilarious ways. Well, and it's funny too because not only is there that aspect of it. I mean, so the big question is, why does art exist? Well, one answer is it exists for its own sake, and I totally believe that. But it also exists to we want things to be better, you know, it's part of being a human being in a culture. So on the one hand, one route to that is that whole positive thing, modeling that's positive, helping people think through, you know. On the other hand, there's exploration. Now, people tend to think that adult literature can be about exploration, but children's literature can't. And if you think that, then I give you outside over there, or Where the Wild Things Are,
Mhm.
books that explore huge, dark, profound philosophical and psychological questions, and they're written for little kids.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So every part of children's writing in general, has that potential to fulfill every part of what adult fiction and nonfiction can fulfill too. And again, like I say, this is one of those things. You can imagine too, I'm on a campus and I get wonderful support on my campus, but if I say, yeah, I published a children's book, people are like, that's nice, congratulations. When I recently published my book of adult poetry, they're like, wow.
Yeah.
And I'm
See?
like,
But you know what's interesting?
minute.
That's no
You
good.
know what's interesting when you're thinking about that too is that I think one of the things that's so amazing about writing for children is you have the potential to change a child's life. I mean, how many times, Tim, at those SCBWI conferences have we heard, an author, maybe even a Newbery winning author, stand up and talk about that one book that made them want to write, or even just somebody saying, I felt so lonely when I was in elementary school and I would go to the libraries, and books are really what got me through. I mean, there's so many things about being able to touch a child's life that is just so impactful.
That's exactly right. And our model for this, one metaphor for it is the New Testament thing about the sower and the seed. So whatever good you have in you, good, again, in either that positive modeling sense or good in the sense of a difficult exploration of something hard or dark, you scatter that seed everywhere, because you never know where it's going to take root.
Yeah.
You just never know what kid at what time. And you guys probably, my story of how I started writing in 6th grade was dramatic and instantaneous. My story of how I became a children's writer is dramatic and instantaneous. But there have been lots of things that have happened to me in my life that have happened gradually, and I can sometimes go back and go, oh my God, that's the line I read in that book 6 months ago that has been on my mind ever since then, and I feel like I just turned a corner in understanding something.
Yeah.
So, Jenny, I could not agree more with what you're saying.
That is so cool. Aaron, you had a question for Tim, and then I had one more, and then we need to wrap up in the next few.
Ask your question.
Well, I was just going to end with kind of writing advice for others. So if you want to,
that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, think about me. Think about a lot of our listeners who are, have other careers, have never envisioned themselves being a writing, but the more they put words on paper, the more they find this addiction to exploring thoughts, to exploring things with word. What advice would you give somebody like me that knows nobody in the business, doesn't know if I'm good or not, but just is compelled to take what's in my head and make it accessible to people? What can they expect? What would you recommend they do?
So let me give you advice in 2 points, right? And Aaron, I love the way you frame this question too, because it's a very different question to ask. Well, give advice to people who want to be writers, as opposed to give advice to people who are addicted to writing. Because not everybody who wants to be a writer is addicted. And that's why we hear the saying, if you don't have to write, don't. It's a hell of a...
I've never heard it, and I like it.
I'm telling you, it's a great line, because it's a hell of a thing. It's incredibly challenging.
It is.
Children's writing, ironically, is one of the most competitive fields by far, because everybody thinks they can do it and you can write shorter stuff.
Yeah, don't you find everybody wants to write a children's book? Yeah.
Darn it.
Yeah, they all think they can. One of my colleagues, the professor in the English department, he said, so what's your daughter doing? I said, I can't believe it. She wants to be a writer. And he looked at me and said, you're a terrible father. How can you allow that? And at first he's kidding. He knows what it's like, right?
Yeah.
So what's fascinating to me is that we live in a culture that has a very strong tendency to quantify things. Now, I never want to sound like I'm against quantification. Learning to measure, to quantify has helped human beings advance in unspeakably powerful ways. But we have this tendency to over-quantify. And I love what you said, Aaron, about, because I know this feeling from the depths of my soul. I'm like one guy. I'm sitting here in my house. How do I think I could possibly ever be? You have that feeling. Because if you're a big
constantly
author, your name's up there and your website says this, and your books are in the stores, and it's like there's all that quantification of your success. But the truth is, all of that stuff, except for the words on the page, all of that stuff is quantification. The work of the artist begins in the most humble and private and solitary place, which is your own heart. And not to be crude, but it's almost like that phrase, it's your own butt.
Yeah.
You're just a normal person.
I've never heard that
You know,
before.
you don't have a crown on, and you don't come from this family with a huge mansion, and they've all written books. And of course, some people do come from families like that, but that doesn't even matter. So when you write, you have to take the risk, and there's nothing that will reduce the risk. Nothing.
Yeah.
You have to actually offer up something out of your little own self, following your heart and your mind, and the risk is huge. And I think what a lot of us want to do is say, oh my God, can't you tell me a way that the risk is less? And the answer is
Right.
no,
Yeah.
the risk isn't less. The worst risk of all is that what you have to say just may not be good.
Yeah.
And and you guys know this is true, to be honest, for thousands, maybe millions of people who want to be artists, whether writers or other kinds of artists. They're just not very good. That's just the way it is. Now, you can live your life and still create that art.
And
But
should,
in
yeah.
terms of being a public artist and being published and that kind of thing, making art for your private self or for your community, I think that's a beautiful way to live. But if you want to go for the big scale, you have to get out there and take the risk, and it's just got to come inside. So you got to have this ability to just say, it's like Stuart Smalley, you remember from Saturday Night Live?
Yeah.
Doggone, I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. You got to, that's where it's got to come from. And the truth is, the greatest art that was ever made, the Pietà, the Aeneid, what James Joyce, also came from one little person's heart, mind, and life. There's nowhere else it can come from.
Yeah.
Now, and my second one is just my little motto or whatever for writing. In terms of practicality, when it comes to writing, read, write, live, live. That's
Love
how I
it.
say it.
Love it.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that there is no way to get rid of the risk, because we do
Yeah.
that we do that by trying to get friends to read it and tell us that we're good, so we can say like, well, they think I'm good, so this will probably work out for me. We do this in so many different ways to try to make it reasonable, and I love this thought coming from Tim that it is unreasonable. Deal with it. It is unreasonable. It's risky. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
And I love the word unreasonable there. And the thing is, too, you still have to make a self-assessment of your work.
Right.
I'm the last guy in the world who should be judging whether I can be a writer or not, but who else can I get to do it?
Yeah.
So I've got to look at it as honestly as possible and keep looking at it and keep figuring out. Unreasonable is perfect.
Yeah.
That's a perfect word, Aaron.
And Tim, I love how you said read, and write, because we've said that, but what you added to that is live. And it's like when you have that passion to write and you're moving forward and taking that risk, you are living. You're living out your passion. And I just think linking all of those three things together is perfect.
Yeah.
I'm delighted to hear you say that. In fact, Jenny, I like what you added to it, because I don't want to give the impression that somehow you have to be like a Hemingway figure and go, to the Gulf of Mexico and fish for, swordfish. You don't have to do that. Whatever life you're living.
Thank goodness.
Being right. Maybe we should all go down to Cuba and maybe we can be writers that way.
Yeah. Tim, man, thank you so much for me. I'll let Jenny wrap it up here. I just wanted to thank you for the words that you brought about writing, about the process of art and parenting, and I don't know, just helping for me clarify that this is a path that was what I thought it was. It's not one that's wide and stable. It's one that's going to require something of myself to do. I like that. So thanks.
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. Thank you so much. It's this Thomas Jefferson quote, Aaron, I think that fits with your excellent point you just made. For, shells we can find on the shore, but for pearls we must dive.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be easy.
Yeah, I love
well,
that.
Thanks. Can't wait to meet you in person sometime. I'm sure we'll run into each other.
Yes.
Jenny keeps following me along to these podcast things. We'll meet sometime. That'll be great.
And Tim, I want to just give a shout out for you. So for your website, for anyone who wants to visit Tim's website and check out his books, it's Tim Myers, Myers, storysong.com.
All one word, Tim Myers,
storysong.com.
Throw it all together. Don't put spaces in there.
Yep. And then also, Tim, I know you have a couple of potential book deals in the works, but what's your latest one out and where can people go to purchase it?
Oh, this is so kind of you, Jenny, to mention the site and bring up the book. It's a little ironic that we're talking about marketing and I forgot to plug. That's bad, isn't it?
No,
we'll
that's
take care
we'll
of
plug
you.
for you.
We'll take care of you.
That's why you're perfect host, right? My new children's book is called Down at the Dino Wash Deluxe. It's available all over the place, obviously on the big website bookstores and in local stores. It's a story about dinosaurs living in the city. How do they stay clean? So these kids open up a big car wash for dinosaurs, and the problem is sooner or later T-Rex is going to come in. So things go on from there.
Oh, I love it. Okay, and so that's it all. People can just get that all over the place. And I see the cover on your website as well.
Yeah, it looked good.
Yeah.
I can't wait to read that book. That sounds like my kind of book right there.
Yeah, it does, huh?
It totally does.
Well, Tim, I thank you so much for joining us. You have been great. It's so great to talk to you, and I'm sure we will be in touch with you for a future episode.